I discovered MBTI for the first time probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And I tested as an ENTP, read the description, thought it fit me pretty well. And I actually got quite into MBTI, I should say. I read up about it a lot, really found a good way to to self-reflect and realize who am I truly, what really makes me tick. And there's a lot about the ENTP description that fits me, but there's also stuff that doesn't fit me. I've never really thought of myself as a debater or an inventor. I have thought of myself as a self-starter, but not like the ESTP is described. Like the ESTP description doesn't really make sense either to me. For me, I should say. Um, like I'm not in the moment. I'm not one of those people that are in the moment all the time at all. Really, I'm kind of in my head for the most part. So, so I thought I was an ENTP. I never really considered that I could be an introvert. The reason being is that my whole life people have been telling me that they think I'm an extrovert. My Including my mom, who I like to think knows me pretty well. So, always thought I was an extrovert. Of all the extrovert types in MBTI, or Jungian, whatever you want to call it, like I know they're two different things. Of all the extrovert types, ENTP made the most sense, followed by ENTJ. And so sometimes I wonder, like maybe I'm an ENTJ, but that didn't really fit as well as ENTP did. I'm not the type who like I'm not a dominant TE for sure. TEs, like I know people who you could tell, you can just like tell when somebody has dominant TE because they tell you every single opinion that they have, like very matter of fact, that this is what we should do, or that is what you should do, or you should do this. And that's not me. I'm more of a everybody do your own thing. What you do is your business. I don't really care what you do. Just leave me alone. Leave me to do what makes sense for me. Uh, as long as you don't mess with me, I won't like you don't tell me what to do, and I won't tell you what to do, and what works for me works for me. What works for you works for you. As long as at the end of the day, the result is the same. Why does it really matter? So I'm not a TE. So then we're back at ENTP. So yeah, long story short, I was really into MBTI and personality typing and Jungian types for about a year and a half. I posted on Personality Cafe actually. I won't tell you which username. But yeah, like I was pretty into it. And then kind of grew out of it, didn't really care that much anymore. Moved on with my life. So now it's probably been about 6 years since I've really been into it. Then, for whatever reason, the last 2 weeks, I got back into just something about personality typing piqued my interest. And then I discovered Dave's Superpowers channel and watched a lot of his videos about the cognitive functions and um, how your first and fourth functions are going to be very unbalanced, whereas your two middle functions are going to be more balanced. It's a little bit harder to tell uh, what is a little bit harder to tell which one's two and three versus one and four. And then he said another thing that really got me thinking and really got me questioning if I actually am an ENTP. And that is he said it's very obvious what's missing in a person's personality. So, and that usually what people's main fear is tends to be correlated with their fourth function. So, for example, with an ENTP, let's put the emphasis on the E, the ENTP, the fourth function would be SI, and then according to Dave, their main fear in life is being controlled by somebody else, like letting other people control them, having to make other people, forcing them to follow rules, etc. And that is definitely true for me. Although I wouldn't really call it a fear. I would call it an annoyance, something that I avoid, but probably not a fear. What is a fear for me is what I do constantly think about and worry about is doing something wrong that's gonna piss somebody off, or people perceiving me incorrectly. I'm constantly worried about what people think of me. And that, to me, correlates with FE. And if that is what constantly occupies my mind, then that would suggest that I'm my inferior function would be FE, which means that my dominant function would be TI. And this got me thinking as well. And it made me wonder, because all this time I thought my dominant function was NE. But then I wondered, is it actually? Could it be that my dominant function is actually TI? So the question then becomes, am I the type of person who constantly thinks of ideas and then uses internal logic to assess those ideas? Or am I the type of person who constantly tries to understand everything around me and uses NE to come up with questions to assess that theory from different angles, like constant different angles? And truth be told, I'd say that makes more sense. That is a more accurate depiction of who I am. That's not to say that I don't consider myself to be creative. I do think that I'm a fairly creative person, not in an artistic way, but more in a problem-solving way. Thinking of, let's say, unconventional solutions to problems that other people wouldn't necessarily think of. So, if we factor in that if we go along this idea of, I used to think I'm an ENT, but actually I'm an INTP, then there's something else that doesn't really make sense. Now, I get that you can't really group people into 16 little boxes. There's way more variation to people than that. In fact, everybody's unique. They say everybody's a doppelganger, like looks-wise, but whether or not that's true, who knows? But like, everybody's personality is unique as well. So now that said, I do think you can type people. And another one of Dave's theories or classifications is they actually break all the types into 32 subtypes. So I'm sure if you take a look at me, assuming I am an INTP, if you take a look at me and compare it to another INTP, it's going to be two completely different people. So I get that. The question then becomes, if I'm truly an introvert. I've really thought of myself as an introvert before. I always considered myself to be an extrovert, mainly because people tell me I'm an extrovert, or the people that have told me, if they have an opinion one way or another, say I'm an extrovert, including my mom and my brother. But then I think about what's the definition of an introvert versus extrovert. Like, do I prefer being alone or do I prefer being around people? The answer is both. obviously. If you ask any person, they'll tell you the same thing. Do I feel particularly drained or energized by either, like being alone or being around people? The answer is both. Both can drain me, both can energize me. It really depends on the situation. It depends what I'm doing. If I'm alone but I'm working on something that really interests me, that is, I just need to finish it, then that energizes me. I can just keep going and going and going. Alternatively, if I'm home, I've got nothing to do, I'm bored, then I'm looking to like talk to somebody or just find something to do. Doesn't necessarily have to be with somebody, or that can be something else alone, just looking for something to do because I'm bored. Other times I'm around people, we're talking about something, a very engaging topic, and I want to keep being around those people, whether it's a group activity or one-on-one. Truth be told, I prefer one-on-one more than being in groups. Other times, if it's like, say a large group of people, everybody just like talking within the group, typically more surface level conversations, and that doesn't really, I don't really enjoy that. I'd rather have a meaningful, full conversation with somebody. So, I guess the answer is it depends. I would say that I'm a sociable type. Social skills for me was learned over time. I got better at it. As a kid, I was probably a little bit awkward, whereas other kids may have been more, or some other kids may have been more natural with it. I think some people, they're just more naturally outwardly focused. Think like FE dominance. Whereas for me, FE is definitely a lower stack function. So, long story short, I believe that I'm either an ENTP or INTP. Right now I'm leaning towards INTP. One thing that Dave mentioned in a video is that oftentimes people will they'll type themselves as the opposite of what they truly are because they haven't, the way that they portray themselves is in an ideal fashion. And I thought about this. For me, that would mean, since I thought I was an ENTP, based on his assessment of people type themselves as the opposite, would mean that I'm truthfully an ISFJ, which I don't think is true at all. Like, I read up on ISFJs, and not the description, but like the order of the functions. And for an ISFJ, it's dominant SI, followed by FE, TI, NE. And the concerns that an ISFJ has, not really something that fits or like describes me. I'm definitely not a dominant SI. Way too unorganized, not on top of things at all. in like the physical world. And I don't think my fourth function is NE. I'm fairly certain. Well, I'm like let's say 99% certain that I'm in some type of NT. It crossed my mind that I could be an INTJ, but I don't think I am, because INTJs have dominant NI and inferior SE. For me, SE shouldn't be in my top 4, I don't think. I'm just not really aware of what's around me. I'm not really focused on it at all. Whereas I think SEs are still somewhat focused on what's around them physically, like they're a little bit more aware. I'm too spaced out a lot of time for that. Yeah. So it's either NETI or TINE. Right now, I think I'm dominant TI, inferior FE. That makes sense. And I realize that people watching this don't know me. I'm going to post it anonymously because it's a little, I don't feel like explaining to people who know me why I made this video. And I realize you don't know me, but the way I talk now is the way that I usually talk. So you tell me, what do you think? And I'm sure I'm not the only person who wonders what type they are. So just curious what other people or how other people assess themselves, and based on how you see the way that I'm communicating here, what do you think I am? All right, cheers.